Welcome to the lecture on culturally and linguistically competent care. Today I'm going to cover why this type of care is important, some basic assessment tips including do's and don'ts, and some strategies for competence in culture and linguistics. Why this is important is because American demographics are changing. In 2012, the U.S. population was approximately 63% white, 16% Hispanic or Latino, 13.1% Black or African American, 5.1% Asian. American Indian, Alaskan Native was about 1.2%. Mixed race was about 2.4%, and a very small percentage of Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander. It's predicted by the Pew Research Institute that even though white race will be the largest racial group, in 2045, white race will be less than 50% of the composition of the U.S. Hispanic, there are about 1 in 4 persons will have a Hispanic racial background, and African American will stay approximately the same. There will also be an increase in the Asian population and in mixed race population. In fact, Asian population and Hispanic population growth will triple over the next approximately 30 years. Also, the U.S. population of immigrants is growing. In 2015, about 14% of citizens were foreign born. By the year 2060, it'll be about 19% that will have been born in other countries and come to the United States. So let me define culture. Culture is customary beliefs, social forms, material traits of a religious, racial, or social group. It's characteristic features of everyday existence as well, such as a way of life that's shared by people. It might be in a specific time or a specific place. Like we could say there's a certain social media culture, or there's a Southern culture, or Northern or Eastern, based on geographic region. Culture can also be defined as integrated pattern of human knowledge, belief, and behavior that depends upon the capacity for learning and transmitting knowledge to succeeding generations. So in other words, persons learn as they're growing up, and it's transmitted then to their children and on and on. We also have cultures, different ethnicities that are different groups. You could have a professional group, medicine or business or nursing group. You can have a group based on your political persuasion, a group based on religious affiliation, and we have really many subdivisions of beliefs that play into how people live their lives. So that is why it's important to be competent in culturally and linguistic care. But how do we do that? Because I just mentioned so many groups. How can we possibly deal with all those groups? Well, culturally and linguistically competent care is important because it will help to increase utilization, satisfaction, and adherence. Let's take communication with physicians, for example. That's a problem that 1 in 5 Americans report. However, if a person is of Hispanic race, they are more like 1 in 3 persons will report having a difficulty, and of Asian background, 1 in 4 persons report having a difficulty. A language barrier is even more complicated. Even if a person has sufficient health insurance, economic resources, they are still more likely to report decreased satisfaction with their healthcare services, and they are less likely to follow the treatment plan that has been prescribed for them. Reducing disparities requires us to surmount linguistic barriers and cultural barriers in order to improve the care of our patients. And it is important to reduce racial and ethnic disparities in a sense of equity and fairness and justice, which we pride ourselves on in America. Martin Luther King said, "Of all the forms of inequality, injustice in healthcare is the most shocking and inhumane." And as healthcare professionals, I believe that most of us would strongly agree with this statement from Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. I have some do's and don'ts to help when interacting with persons of different cultural worldviews. The first do is be aware of your own cultural worldview. That also encompasses the second do, which is being aware of your attitude toward cultural differences. You came from a specific cultural background, and assuming that that is what another person will be like, or thinking that that is the best way to be, imposing that on the patient, will create barriers in healthcare. So do demonstrate cultural sensitivity and respect. Do gain cross-cultural knowledge and skills as you have experiences with persons from different cultures. It would not be possible to automatically know or be aware of every variation in a patient that comes into your office. However, you should be competent and aware of local groups that you are likely to see, and additional study will increase your knowledge in this area. But don't try to memorize every detail about each cultural subgroup that you may see. I remember when I was in nursing school, we had to talk about how Asian yin and yang and Hispanic hot and cold foods. Was the cultural group paternalistic or maternalistic? Did they make eye contact or not? And all of those things were kind of difficult to memorize. And in today's variations and mixed races and cultures that we have so many, it's really not possible to do that. So don't worry about that. Some other assessment strategies. Slavin, Galanti, and Kuo in 2009 talked about the 4 C's of culturally competent care. The first C is, what do you call the problem? If a person comes into your office and they have diabetes, if it's an older African American person, they may say they have sugar. Instead of hypertension, they'll say high blood. Well, it's just understanding a little bit what those terms mean and explaining in terms that your patient will really understand. What do they think caused the problem? Do they think it's because someone in the neighborhood gave them the evil eye? Okay, that's something that needs to be understood and worked with. How do you cope with your condition? So what treatments would be important to them? Might they want a local healer to come? Is the diet important? All the things that might be necessary to incorporate into your care plan from a cultural perspective. And what are their concerns regarding the problem? What are they most afraid of happening? Losing their independence, having to be taken care of by children because that's absolutely taboo in the culture, those types of things. Finally, I would like to offer some strategies for providing culturally and linguistically competent care. These are based on the Department of Human Services National Class Culturally and Linguistically Appropriate Standards. There are 15 of these, and they are recommended for incorporation by every healthcare delivery system. Trained interpreter services is important. So this is not just grabbing a family member or a friend to come in and interpret, but it is someone who understands how to interact with that person, how to make them feel comfortable. Easy to understand written translations and printed pamphlets in their primary language. And these should not be on a high educational level either. The person may have only gone through primary school. The reading comprehension may not be that great. Pictures help a lot too. Multimedia materials and signage, in fact, to that point, signs in their language and pictures in their language. Concordant clinicians and staff. So as much as possible, have in your office staff persons or clinicians that are of similar race, of similar ethnic background, and may be able to make a better connection with your client. Ongoing education and training in cultural competence is very important. I think particularly focusing in on what are the local groups that you will be working with. And community health workers to work closely with the patients. These are persons who live in the community and they can visit, intercede, how are things going with your medicine, your diet, your exercise plan, the wellness type strategies that we can reinforce. Also, grievance procedures that promote culturally appropriate means of conflict resolution. So what is important to give respect if there's a dispute? How do you help the person fully express their concerns and feel heard if they have issues? Organizational support is crucial. Culturally sensitive and linguistically appropriate care should be incorporated into your organizational goals. The leaders should back and give support to all initiatives that are to help clinicians understand more about working with people of different cultures and increase sensitivity of everyone in your healthcare system. And finally, continuous quality improvement, reporting to community stakeholders about advances that are being made, health outcomes that are positive, and cultural initiatives that have been successful. Finally, I have included on the last slide some resources and references, the class standards, and other things that you can take a look at to help you learn more about different cultures and about assessing them. In conclusion, being aware of the culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds of our patients throughout your healthcare career will help you provide wonderful, competent care. Thank you.